Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorvik, and welcome back to Fandom Friendly episode number 8. We have a lot to talk about this week. There was some big movie news in the realm of Star Wars, some DC stuff. We also got some new trailers in between my last episode and this one. One of those being Shrek 5, at least a teaser trailer for it, and of course, like most things nowadays, it is being called woke, has a slew of controversies surrounding it. But we will talk about that here in a minute. And I think to cap off the episode, we're going to be talking about the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again. Spoiler alert, I like it. I think it's a great continuation of the show, but again, we'll talk more in depth about it towards the end of the episode. As always, if you want to skip ahead to any topic that I cover, the links will be in the description and hopefully on the timeline as well. Sometimes it's hit or miss. I don't really know. And as always, if you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with your friends. I am working on getting some guests on this show that cover a wide variety of topics such as modeling, acting, filmmaking, other artists. And I have access to a studio now, so hopefully some of these episodes will be shot in a studio setting, which I think will be kind of cool. So stick around for that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of the big news I think that came out in the last week. Is that Kathleen Kennedy, who, if you don't know, was the president of Lucasfilm for Star Wars, and she announced that she will be stepping down from her position. And I think to a lot of people, they're probably like, yes, finally, we're getting rid of her. But to people who actually know how films are made, this happens. This isn't like something crazy, like she got pushed out because of whatever. I think there's a lot of reasons that she left. I think she's definitely an older woman. I think she's in her 60s, I believe. And I think it's time to move on. When you're in that kind of producing level, you only want to work doing so much, for like one franchise. You know what I mean? I don't blame Kathleen Kennedy. I know a lot of people blame her for the way that Star Wars has been going the last 12 years, but it's really not that simple. I mean, just look at any film production company, any film studio. There are multiple people that make decisions. It's not just one person. I mean, look at Kevin Feige. Like, yes, Kevin Feige is the president of Marvel Studios, but he does have other producers. He has a Marvel board, if you will. Like, it's not just one person making decisions, is really what I'm trying to say. Like, it is a conclave of people, making decisions, developing films, developing shows. I mean, it's just these people, I talked about it when I talked about the Alkalite last fall, but these people that don't understand how a film gets made, how a TV show gets made. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just one person greenlighting things, at least for the most part. I mean, there are cases where that is the case, but for the most part, it's a board of people that make these decisions. Part of that article talked about who could replace Kathleen Kennedy, because someone has to be at the head of Star Wars. There were some names that were thrown out. 2 of those names will definitely be familiar to people. First one, Jon Favreau. Look, I like Jon Favreau. I think he produces really good content, good films and TV. If you don't know, he was the creator of The Mandalorian, and he's currently working on The Mandalorian and Grogu. You also might know Jon Favreau because he plays Happy in the MCU, also directed the first 2 Iron Man films. And look, I think Jon Favreau is a great filmmaker. I think he really has a handle on the type of story that he wants to tell within the Star Wars universe. But I don't think it's a position that he wants. Do you know what I mean? I know the guy personally. I don't know the guy personally. I'm just saying he just seems like the type of guy who wants to focus on, the projects that he wants to focus on and then move on, And I say that because like the next guy too, Dave Filoni, who also does like Ahsoka, he worked on the Clone Wars, he worked on Rebels. He's also kind of like the brainchild of George Lucas as well, really knowledgeable in Star Wars lore. But these guys, as writers and producers and directors and stuff like this, they want hands-on their projects. And if they if they get in a position where they are just green lighting projects or red lighting projects, they're not going to be hands on. It's all admin work. It's boring. Wow, I would love for the both of them to kind of be the head of Star Wars, because I do really like The Mandalorian. I do really like Ahsoka, for different reasons. There's different reasons why I like those shows. I even like Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett to an extent. It's just they are full creatives, and I don't think that they want to be in an admin position like that. So I don't know. I don't know who could run Star Wars. I don't know if maybe even Kevin Feige's name was thrown in there, but he's way too busy with Marvel. I don't think him running Star Wars and running Marvel is really good. Now, if they pulled someone from the MCU side who is a great producer, that they could move them over to Star Wars, then sure. I don't know who that could be. I'm not too familiar with the hierarchy of Marvel Studios, but I trust that Disney, or whoever's in charge. I mean, it is Disney, but I mean, like, whoever's in charge of finding that person will hopefully make a good pick. And hopefully it's not a David Zaslav situation, because that guy needs to be fired. Let's just be honest. Speaking of David Zaslav and Warner Bros. Discovery, DC announced more of a full slate of what they want to release. The Clayface movie is like being fast tracked, which I think is crazy, but it is from Mike Flanagan, which, if you don't know, he did Haunting a Hill House, he did Midnight Mass, Haunting of Bly Manor, some of the best horror like shows that are out there. And I think Clayface as a character can fall in line with some of that horror elements, but it is interesting. Did you guys think like to me, I wouldn't do a Clayface movie, like the Penguin, the show, like, I think that was kind of like a fluke in a way that character was so good in the Batman that Matt Reeves created, that character could carry on his own show. And I think if Clayface was in a movie first on a show, and he had such an interesting character arc, then maybe I could see a movie or a TV show. I think this is going to be a movie. But it is just really bizarre to me, because I remember James Gunn, when he was announcing all the DC stuff a couple years ago, it like Marvel, it seems like he has a plan for all these films and TV and stuff like that. So it is interesting to me that Clayface is one of those projects that's being fast tracked. They also talked about how Batman 2 is in the works. It's looking at a 2027 release date, which it's not far away, but it is far away. The last one came out in 2022. Okay, that was already 3 years ago. That movie came out, and it's just crazy to me. Like, I know it's like a running gag now where it's like, oh, well, TV shows, they'll do 8 episodes, and then 2 years later, the next season comes out. And I know movies take time. I know Matt Reeves is busy, but man, fast track that movie. Come on. They did also mention that the Batman, the Brave and the Bold, which is the Batman movie that'll be within this kind of this DCU, right? Supergirl, starring Millie Aycock, is I think starting filming this month as a recording, or it's going to start filming soon, or it might have already started filming. I have no idea. But principal photography for that, I think is, should be relatively quickly. I think a few months, I think, will be good for that. There were some other announcements made, but it's stuff we pretty much already knew. Stuff about the Authority, stuff about Peacemaker. I think they started filming on the Green Lantern show, which I am pretty excited for, even though they announced that show like 8 years ago. But, here we are, finally. There were some set photos released, but it's them in just like civilian clothes. It's not actual like Green Lantern suits or anything. So that is yet to be seen. Moving on to the Marvel side of things, we got a terrible news that Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third in the trilogy for the Across the Spider-Verse films, has been delayed to 2029. Across the Spider-Verse came out, when was that? Was that 22? 23? Was that summer of 23 when that movie came out? And if you remember, Beyond the Spider-Verse, the third one, was supposed to come out like in March of 2024. and then that got pushed back to I think the end of 2024, and then it got pushed back towards I think because of the writer's strike, it got delayed, and then it was delayed indefinitely, and we never heard anything about it until recently. Now I know there was some controversy with Shamik Moore, who is the voice artist that voices Miles in those movies, something to do with Haley Steinfeld, who voices Spider-Gwen. I'm not too well versed on what the controversy is. I think it was something to do with that she got engaged a few months ago, and he was like all upset about it. And then I think there he was seen with the actress who plays Liz in Spider-Man: Homecoming. I'm sorry, I don't know what her name is. He was seen with her, and he posted something about her, and then she came out and was like, "No, that was nothing." So, typical, I guess, scummy behavior. Again, allegedly. Again, I'm not too well versed on the situation there. I should be if I'm going to be talking about it. But yeah, so 4 more years until the new Spider-Man the Spider-Verse movie comes out, which is just, look, I appreciate animation. We talked about it last week in our last episode. It's just, I know it takes a long time, but saying how in 2027 that they're going to start recording lines, like what happened, like what is going on? Like if they were going to release this film back to back pretty much a year apart, part 1 and part 2, did they just scrap the entire like third movie and are redoing it? Like did I miss that somewhere? If you know, please let me know. I mean, I will do my own research and I'll probably talk about it in a different episode. I say this a lot, but Sony, I know it's Sony Pictures and Sony Animation are technically 2 separate divisions, so it's not like Sony Pictures' fault, but they do own the rights to Spider-Man. And I've said it before. I said it when we talked about Craven. I said about it when talking about some of the other Spider-Man stuff, that Sony needs to have their rights taken away. It's true. I think Marvel needs to step in, or I guess Disney needs to step in and just whatever Spider-Man's worth, if it's, I know it's in the billions, just buy it. Just again, like I said, I think I want to do a whole episode on like the Sony sperm movies, whatever they're called. They're not called that, but whatever they want to call them, of Spider-Man adjacent films with all these villains who have connections to Spider-Man but don't actually have connections to Spider-Man is insane. So moving on to trailers, one of the big trailers that came out after I shot the last episode was for Andor Season 2. I don't think I mentioned this in any videos because Andor, it's been a while since the first season came out. I love that show. I think that show is peak Star Wars, and I will take that to the grave. And from most people in my circles who are into the film industry, into Star Wars, they do really like that show, because of just how, like, I know this word gets thrown around a lot, but I love how gritty it is. And of course, Rogue One, I think, is the best Star Wars film. Like, period. There's no debate about it. And having the same people who worked on Rogue One work on Andor Season 1 and Season 2. But yeah, the trailer was great. It really showed the rebellion amping up. And I think this show is just the show that we need right now. It's no secret, I hate the American government. I will say that on camera and put it on the internet. And hopefully this show will give me some ideas, if you know what I mean. But yeah, it's just the right mix of action, the right mix of politics, the right mix of just the character growth from Season 1 into Season 2 and eventually into Rogue One. I don't know. I'm really excited. It's going to be 12 episodes. It's going to be 3 episode arcs, and each 3 episode arcs are going to take place a year apart, leading up to the events of Rogue One. So, in theory, you can watch Andor Season 1, 2, Rogue One, and A New Hope as like a consecutive timeline. Now, if you know the timeline of Star Wars, technically speaking, the Ghost Crew from the Rebels are also active at this point in time, so maybe we will get a cameo from Syndulla, Elizabeth Winstead from Ahsoka, who played her in the live action. We know she's active at this time, as well as the entire Ghost Crew. We can also get Ezra to an extent. We can get Freddie Prinze Jr. as Kanan Jarrus. I think it would be really cool to kind of see him in live action. Because we technically seen the entire crew in live action, I think, except for Kanan Jarrus. There was a picture of him in Ahsoka. You can kind of see from our way, and it did look like pretty Freddie Prinze Jr. But I don't know. It's very possible we can get a small cameo. Although the creators of the show said that they don't want to rely on cameos, which is something I really appreciate, because I do want to focus on Andor. I do want to focus on the rise of the rebellion and the rise of this escalation of power from the rebels leading up to, the events of Rogue One and A New Hope. But yeah, that's pretty much for that. It comes out, I believe, in May. I know it premieres, I think, the same day that Daredevil ends. Moving on to another trailer that is in the Pooh-averse, if you don't know. So every year, every January 1st, there is a lapse of copyright when it comes to certain characters. I think it's 80 years, depending on the character. If nothing's been made, if it becomes like in the public domain, basically. So as a filmmaker or a writer or whatever, you can use that character to create new stories going forward because it is public domain. We first saw this a few years ago when Winnie the Pooh entered public domain, and we got a Winnie the Pooh horror film. I think it was called Blood and Honey or something like that. Obviously, wasn't good. But we did get that film. I think there was a second one, or they're working on a second one. I'm not for sure. Last year, it was announced that there will be a Steamboat Willie, which was the precursor to Mickey Mouse way back in the day. That character specifically entered public domain, and there was also, shocker, a horror film called Steamboat Willie. But this trailer that came out this past week, I guess Popeye is now in the public domain, and now there is a Popeye horror film coming out. I like horror films. I think they can, if they're done right, they can be done right. But this schlock just, it really pulls the genre down. Does that make sense? Am I crazy? Look, it's the same thing with Blumhouse, right? Like, they only spend like $1 million, $2 million, up to $5 million for a really bad horror film, because they know that they're going to make millions of dollars back on it, because all of these teenagers are going to go see it and think it's just the best film ever. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some hidden gems in there, okay? I'm not going to deny that, all right? I'm not. But when you're batting record, but it's really like 1 out of like 10 films, I think, are good. I don't know. It just looks like another really bad horror film, but props to, the crew, the cast. They really know who their audience is going to be, and I hope it makes at least $1 million, maybe. But let's go ahead and move on to one of the last trailers I want to talk about, and that is the Shrek 5 teaser trailer. Look, I like the Shrek films. I think Shrek 2 is the best out of all of them. It's just such a classic film. I remember seeing Shrek 1 in the theaters, like in 2000, 2001, whenever that was, and I remember loving that film as well. There's even parts of Shrek the Third that I like, and that's the worst one. Now, they announced Shrek 5, I want to say, was that pre-pandemic? That had to have been. It was a long time ago. I remember they announced that Shrek 5 was coming. And of course, everyone was like, why do we need Shrek 5? Why do we need this? Why do we need a reboot? It's because they like money. Let's be honest. Come on. So the teaser came out, and everyone hated it. and I understand why, because they did the thing. The voice cast is returning, which is surprising. I'm going to be honest. So Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, Mike Myers. The person who added to the cast was Zendaya, who is playing Shrek's daughter. I remember him having triplets, so I don't know where the other two are, but she is playing like a teenage, whatever, however old their daughter is. And they do this thing, I have to give credit to DreamWorks, because they're really playing into the fact that Shrek, like almost every frame of Shrek is a meme. Shrek is love, Shrek is life, or whatever. And they showcase that. They do like a TikTok style thing with Magic Mirror, and they're showing all of these different memes with Shrek, and they're all like kind of creeped out and like cringed about it, which fair. But that's not even the big controversy. The big controversy is that people you know what, no, I'm gonna say that later. The biggest controversy is that Shrek doesn't look the same. Yeah, no shit. Now, to me, at first, it was a tad jarring, right? Because we haven't seen this version of Shrek yet. And we're so used to the old, art style of the Shrek universe, but that has recently changed with the Puss in Boots movies. The last one that came out, what was that, 2022 or whatever that was? And that style was more like colorful, it was more cartoony, which is fine. And that's what this style is. And I think people also got to remember is that this movie is not for 30-year-olds, who grew up with Shrek. This movie is for children. Like, if you don't like it, guess what? The other movies still exist. You can still go watch Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. Like, they're out there. I think the main thing is that I think his eyes are too close together. I think that's probably what it is. I think if the eyes were just a little bit further apart, like they are originally, I think he would look like he did, just more cartoony, which again is fine. It's not that big of a deal. The second controversy with it is that people think that Shrek is trans now. First of all, that doesn't even make sense. What are we talking about here? But Shrek is woke now, I guess. Which is also a stupid comparison because Shrek originally was also woke. Like, if you want to use the right's definition of woke, which isn't even what the actual definition of woke is. So annoying that we have to just put up with this shit all the time. I just don't know what to do. Anyways, that's all I have to say about the Shrek trailer. I really don't. I don't care. I'm not gonna see it in theaters. I will wait for it to come out on Peacock or whatever. I don't even know what it'll come on. Again, this movie is not for me. Okay, this is for children or people who are my age that have children that grew up with these films. That's it. And guess what? If I don't like Shrek 5, I can still go back and watch Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. It's not that serious, guys. Let's be real. Okay, I think that's about it for some of the stuff I want to talk about this episode. But let's go ahead and get into talking about Daredevil Born Again. These first two episodes do a really good job of reintroducing us to the criminal underworld of New York, Hell's Kitchen, reintroducing us to the character of Daredevil, Kingpin, who we have seen a couple times in previous MCU projects. Once Disney Marvel got the rights back to Daredevil and the rest of the Defenders characters, the Netflix shows, they started sprinkling them in. So we first saw Kingpin back in Hawkeye, more comic version of Kingpin, where they made him look really big, kind of super strong in some of his like classic outfits that he wears in the comics. We also saw him in Echo. He was the villain of that, and that was interesting too. I do like his portrayal in that. I love Vinny D'Onofrio. Vinny D'Onofrio as Kingpin, just the way that he talks and his little mannerisms and twitches, going Vanessa. I don't know what it is, man. I love it. He just has like that New York gruff that I really appreciate. Same thing with Matt. It's good to see Charlie Cox back as Daredevil. I mean, obviously we saw him. I think he first appeared in No Way Home, defending Spider-Man. That was his first reappearance into the MCU. Of course, he had a cameo in Echo as well, and he was in a couple episodes of She-Hulk. Now, I think this season's supposed to be 8 episodes. Originally, it was going to be 18, which, first of all, what a weird episode number count. And I think they shot most of season 1. That was because that was kind of the big thing with the show, is that they shot most of season 1. And Kevin Feige was not happy with it, and they pretty much scrapped a lot of the show and just restarted, which, including the pilot episode, the first episode was also completely reshot. And what a great first episode. And again, this is a project that I mentioned this when I talked about Captain America last episode, that like, when you're this deep into the MCU, you have to be like a true fan, right? Like, if you didn't watch the Netflix show and you just came into this show, like, you would have no idea. You would have no idea who Foggy is. You would have no idea who Karen is. You would have no idea who Bullseye is, who is at the beginning of this of the first episode. And same thing, you wouldn't understand the relationship between Daredevil and Kingpin as well. Like, there's just so much that The show doesn't really hold your hand, which again I appreciate as someone with intelligence that can watch movies and film. I don't need my hand to be held throughout the entire thing, but I do appreciate that they sort of explain stuff. Like there are some allusions to Echo, there are some allusions to like season 3 of Daredevil specifically, because that was the last season. But I think before I get into spoilers, because there are spoilers we need to talk about. Yeah, like I said, the first episode's pretty good. Like it reintroduces Matt, reintroduces his supporting characters, reintroduces the world, pretty well. The main plot of this show is that Fisk is running for mayor. That's nothing new. If you watched Echo, he got that idea in that show to run for mayor, which is interesting when it comes to like the timeline of things, because currently the most current MCU project is in April of 2027. That is Captain America Brave New World. I believe this show takes place before that. I think this show takes place in the fall or the winter of 26, 27 within the MCU. And the reason I think that is because we know She-Hulk takes place in, I think, summer or like fall of 2025. And Matt is in that show, and he has his yellow and red suit. And then he goes back to New York. He's not really Daredevil. He kind of is Daredevil. And then at the beginning of this episode, we see him in this red suit. And it seems like he hasn't been Daredevil for a while, which puts it closer to like to winter of 25 is when that kind of happens. And I'm going to get into spoilers now. So if you have not seen the 2 episodes, go and watch them, and then you can come back. But at the beginning of this episode, we see Bullseye returning from the end of Daredevil season 3, where he portrayed Daredevil, and then the Kingpin broke his back, and so we saw. We ended there was a post-credit scene where he was getting spinal surgery, so he's back now, and he's in like a proto Bullseye costume, like he has like tactical armor on and all that kind of stuff like that. Well, we don't know why, but he does attack Foggy, and he shoots Foggy through the heart, and Karen is there, and he goes to kill Karen, and they're at a bar full of like cops and stuff like that. And then Daredevil comes in, and we get this awesome seamless, I say seamless because there are hidden cuts in there, if you know what to look for. But we get a one take fight scene through the bar and into the back, up the stairs, and all the way up to the roof. I think it's around 3.5 minutes, which is great. And let me talk about, dude, the violence in the show is just the right amount of brutal, but not like brutal where it's kind of overkill. Does that make sense? I mean, we do see cops get shot in the head. We see people get knives thrown into them, like innocent people get knives thrown into them as Bullseye is fighting Daredevil, and they're going through like the bar. And you see people who try to, again, because there's cops, you see people trying to attack Bullseye, but he like throws like pull balls at him, and pull balls are like solid rock. Not really, I don't know really actually what they're made out of, but if you get hit with them, it could kill you, and these people get hit with them, and you just see like these people just die, and it's just kind of crazy. And then as the fight continues upstairs, there's just like a random guy, because like in New York and most cities, you have the half commercial, the hybrid buildings, they have commercial, half that have like business at the bottom and apartments on top. Some guy comes down, he goes, yo, he goes like, what's all this racket? And then he gets a knife thrown into him, dies. And then like his wife or someone who was there in the hallway as Bullseye is working up the stairs, she's like freaking out, oh my god, and he just goes up and just punches her in the gut. Or seamlessly, we don't see it. We just see the action of him going and punching this woman, and she collapses to the ground, presumed dead as well. Just absolutely brutal. And at the same time, while this is happening, you see Daredevil's fighting him, and he's rusty. Bullseye's rusty because they're both out of breath, and the way that they're fighting. Matt has like 12 knives in him, like it's freaking crazy. But he stops and he listens for Foggy's heartbeat, because that, and by the time he gets up to the roof of the building, he has Bullseye like by the collar, and Foggy finally dies and succumbs to his wounds. And Karen is down there trying to help stop the blood, and she's crying and freaking out, and Matt just loses it and just throws Bullseye off the roof. And they show it. Him falling all the way down, just splat on the ground. And it's just crazy because like that's like the first 15 minutes of the show is like that whole thing. And it's just one of those things where that's where like Matt stopped being Daredevil, because he crossed the line. He tried to kill Bullseye. And it's one of those themes that keeps coming back in these superhero stuff, and it's a theme that I explore in my own superhero universe as well, is the act of seeking justice and taking justice into your own hands in a way. I mean, look at Punisher. That was something that was explored in not only his TV show, but also season 2 of Daredevil, where he was introduced. There's a great scene where John Berthal's Punisher, Frank, has Matt tied up, and they have that conversation about morality. To Frank, him and Daredevil are the same. They go out and they seek out justice, but to Matt, they're not the same, because Matt doesn't kill, and it's just that kind of rhetoric that gets thrown around a lot in these superhero stuff, because it is important. If you are a hero, do you cross that line? Do you, put people in the ground if you need to? Do you need to stop someone for real, not just throw them in jail? And that's a big thing in like Batman lore too, Why doesn't Batman just kill the Joker and be done with it? Why go through the cycle of the same old story, over and over again? That's especially what happened with Jason Todd and like that whole thing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into, kind of that rhetoric of being a superhero, being an anti-hero, or being a villain. But anyway, so after a strong beginning, we move on to 1 year later. And this is how I know that this is probably 26 to 27, because it is announced that Fisk is running for mayor. Then we get a reunion with between Matt and Fisk, which is great. It's that diner scene that you see in the trailers of them just like kind of talking back and forth. I love shit like that. And then he gets elected. He gets elected mayor, and then it's a New Year's Eve celebration is when he gets elected. So that makes me believe that this is the end of 2026 into 2027. But again, yet to be seen. And from there, episode 2 is more or less the same. It's Matt dealing with the fact that that Fisk is mayor now. We see Fisk in a position of power where, he tries to get things done, and looking at the other MCU stuff, especially after Captain America, why Ross was elected president, is that people in the MCU are sick of superheroes. They are sick of, their cars being thrown at alien invaders. They're sick of, half the people got snapped away and came back 5 years later, which isn't really talked about in this so far. I wonder if that will come up at all in this show, especially dealing with the politics of superheroes. Actually, this was surprising, and I was wondering if they did it, and if they would do it, and they sort of did. We did get a Spider-Man shout out, name drop, if you will. It was during Fisk's acceptance speech where he talked about mass vigilantes, because that's what he was running on. He said, a man with a skull on his chest, which is Punisher, so we know he's around. We know he's returning this season as well, John Bernthal. Talked about Daredevil, and then he said a man in a spider costume. Now, he didn't say Spider-Man, I think just because, Sony riots, but it still acknowledges that Kingpin knows that Spider-Man is out there and that he is active enough to be name dropped like that, which I think is the second episode deals with White Tiger. It's our first introduction of White Tiger in the MCU. Unfortunately, the actor that portrays him passed away. We know that because this episode was dedicated to his memory. So I'm assuming he was able to finish out the season, but that does give precedence that unfortunately, when we go to like his house, you know, because there's an investigation because he stopped a mugging, or not a mugging. These two guys were beating up on this guy because they were trying to extort money from him. And as he steps in and he fights, not as White Tiger, but as his civilian in a subway tunnel, he fights these guys off, and then one of them goes to punch him, and he dodges it, and that guy falls into a subway track as a train's coming and dies. And then it's revealed that the guys he was fighting were NYPD, undercover NYPD, and so he gets arrested naturally. So he's labeled as a cop killer, and Matt takes up his case because, he sees the injustice in it, whatever. So it's discovered that he is White Tiger when an ally of Matt, who knows he's Daredevil, goes to the house. We see a picture of presumably the guy's daughter. Now, if you are familiar with White Tiger, you know that there is a female version of White Tiger who was the daughter of the original one. Most prominently, you've probably seen her in the Ultimate Spider-Man TV show, the animated show. That's her. So presumably, we could get that version of White Tiger in the future. But we didn't see him in costume, but he does talk about his amulet that gives him powers, which is kind of cool. We're getting more magic stuff in the MCU. Love it to see it. But that's pretty much what episode 2 was about, was just kind of introducing that character, and hopefully him and Daredevil will team up later on in the show. We also get our first look at another villain named Muse. His character is interesting. At least I think it is. I mean, it has to be. We did get a little clip of him, presumably at the end of episode 1, where he's painting the Fisk mural. But we do see him in like civilian attire at Dr. Glenn, who is Matt's new love interest for this season. She has a book, and he's there asking her if she needs to take on new clients because he needs help. And I think that's who that's supposed to be. It's interesting because in the comics, we actually don't know his identity. We don't know what his real name is, so I wonder how they're going to handle that in this show. They'll probably, create something for that. But again, if you don't know, he is an artist who is also a serial killer. And he's probably one of the most frightening villains that I've seen, at least recently. So I am excited to see, because he uses like the blood of his victims to paint murals and like artwork and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And the episode ends with Matt discovering that he finds the guy that those two cops were beating up, that White Tiger saved, and tells him to escape and that he's going to help him, blah, 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 because he is a witness that can testify against the cops to prove that, I don't know why am I blanking on his name. I know his last name is Ayala or something like that, but White Tiger, to prove him innocent, right? And so that's when two cops come into that apartment and they see Matt there as Matt Murdock, not as Daredevil. And they literally just beat Matt up. And finally, Matt just breaks and just beats the shit out of these two cops to the point where I think he kills one of them, at least. And then it ends with him screaming into the void. So episode 3, it's going to be him dealing with that. And maybe we'll see him suit up again in episode 3. But that is yet to be seen. At the time of recording this, the new episode doesn't come out until next week. So I think Tuesdays is when those episodes premiere. But yeah, I did gloss over a lot because I don't want to do a full breakdown of the show. I just want to talk about it. Then yeah, again, it is the perfect like 2-episode introduction to this world again, to this lower level world. And it does feel like a season 4, more or less, to the Daredevil Netflix show, which can be considered canon now. I know they've gone back and forth on it, but I see it as like canon adjacent, like here's the secret timeline, like you have the main timeline, and then I think the Defenders just kind of take place like right under that, you know what I mean? Like a 616 adjacent, just like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I consider that okay, I should do a video on like how I envision the Marvel cinematic multiverse at this point, because now that we have the X-Men stuff and the Fantastic Four stuff in there, I see it as like you have 616, which is the main MCU timeline. Then you have 616A, which I consider Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of that timeline, because it is the same but also a little bit different. And then I would probably consider 616B be the Defenders, that kind of timeline. And then you have 616C, which is the Runaways and Cloak and Dagger, because they did have a crossover episode, so we know they are in the same universe. And I think you could excuse that for some of the other Marvel shows that aren't really that like kind of allude to the MCU, but like not really, you know what I mean? But anyways, that's kind of how I envision it, is kind of like that. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the episode. Again, just the perfect amount of violence, the perfect amount of grittiness, of just Daredevil being Daredevil. It feels like, I mean, it's been since 2018, was when season 3 came out. It's been 7 years since we've seen a continuation of the story, and so it's nice to kind of see it again. But anyways, guys, that'll be it for this episode. A lot shorter than last episode. We had a lot to talk about last week as well. Let me know what you thought of Daredevil Born Again in the comments below. What are you looking for in this show, and what do you hope, where do you think the show will take you? Let me know what you thought about any of the trailers you talked about, or if there's any other movie news you would like for me to talk about. Please let me know. Again, trying to get back to a weekly schedule with these type of videos. Really been enjoying it. Been dabbling back into filmmaking again. Just shot a short film last weekend. Shooting 2 more in the coming week. So pretty excited for that. Maybe I'll do some behind the scene videos. Really talk about like kind of life on set, that type of thing. If you're into that, let me know. As always, my name is Jorvik, and I'll see you in the next one.